Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Cedar Point Recreation Park. We're getting close to being done with all of our ride infrastructure for Stage 4. Just a couple big coasters left to go and a couple flat rides, things like that. Today we're going to be working on one of the most complicated ride stations we've built so far, and that is Maverick, way at the back of the park. I mentioned back when we built the original ride layout that I have done Maverick before for the DKMP Ride Recreation Contest last year. So I have a pretty good idea of what all is involved in making Maverick's station and infrastructure look decent, and there's definitely a lot of little things going into this ride that make it complicated. Starting off with the track structure itself, we're finally changing it to use the Intamin style track with the Giga Coaster track type. Since the Giga Coaster in RCT doesn't have inversions or vertical slopes, as we've seen with Top Thrill and Millennium, we got to use some dummy track for those pieces, and I'm using Limb Launch track. Spent a little bit of time trying to get Inverted Impulse Coaster to work for the first drop. Doesn't line up correctly, unfortunately. So sadly, that's off the table as of right now. There's a couple other cool little tricks we're using on this ride to emulate the magnetic fins that launch the coaster up the first hill. We're using some single rail track and of course multi-dimensional coaster for catwalks, as we often see on some other coasters. Each of these individual things isn't too terribly complicated, but when you layer them all together like this, it can get a little bit messy and hard to work with sometimes. It takes just a bit of patience to get everything looking correct. One thing I forgot when we first changed the track type is that the Giga Coaster has much faster launch than the Twister Coaster, which is what we originally built it with. So we have the trains going about 100 miles an hour out of that second launch. We do tone that down at the end, but it resulted in some pretty nasty G-forces, which is kind of entertaining, I guess. But that's all fixed up now. Moving on to the station infrastructure, this is just a really difficult one to do from an RCT standpoint. The station building itself is pretty complicated and everything is really crammed in together, so it's hard to get everything put in the places that it needs to go to get it to look right. Way back when we built Wicked Twister, I had mentioned having some concerns about the queues and how they were a little bit too wide compared to real life, and so it might be difficult to get all the paths organized correctly. And up until now, it hasn't really been an issue. We've been able to tweak our path layouts in such a way that everything works out pretty nicely. Until we got to Maverick. In particular, the path that guests use to exit the ride is pretty complicated. It has a weird layout that takes it over the track and down underneath the queue next to the launch tunnel. And there really just isn't room to get it to go the way that I wanted it to go. So everything's really cramped. Doesn't quite go the way it goes in real life. I think there wound up not even being room for the photo area and the gift shop that's under here. Don't remember exactly how that's all laid out. It's really hard to tell from photos and everything. But with the way that paths work in this game, it's almost impossible to get everything sandwiched in here the way that it needs to go. But I think for the most part, things worked out pretty much as best as they could. It's functional and it looks pretty decent, even if it's missing a couple things. So as of right now, I think I'm pretty happy with it. But I am learning the lesson over and over again of not replacing your queues with proxy path until everything is absolutely finished. I had a ton of issues decorating both the queue and the path around the exit. My build uses a lot of little walls and posts, which the game treats as walls, so they block paths. So if you place down some corner posts and then try to place paths down, your paths are going to get disconnected. And if you're using queues with proxy path on top, that's going to get all messed up. So I keep learning this lesson the hard way over and over again. It was a really big headache getting all of the paths to work out correctly. Eventually we did get there. I had to destroy and rebuild the queue at least once and put some decorations back several times to get everything in place the way I wanted it. But that just comes with the territory of playing with OpenRCT. Abusing the tile inspector to get things placed down in ways that the game normally doesn't allow for. Makes things operate in sometimes undesirable ways, and we have to learn to live with it, or work around it. Aside from all the complications we had with the queue area and the station area, the rest of the ride wasn't too terrible. Although there is quite a lot of terrain work around Maverick compared to most of the other coasters in the park. We've got a lot of foliage, a lot of rock work around the track just for some extra scenery. I added some of this stuff in today, but as this build has already taken quite a long time, I decided to save some of it for a later phase. We've got a whole phase dedicated to foliage, and I don't want to waste too much time putting down trees and things when they are probably going to get deleted later. But this is a pretty nice part of the park, especially for a part of the park that you can't really see unless you're on the ride or on the railroad that goes around the other side of it. The park did put a lot of effort into making this area look pretty nice. So I'm definitely going to have to spend a little bit more time here later adding in some more foliage and some fences around the ride, tweaking my rock work and things like that. For the rock formations that go around the ride, I'm using the monumental pieces. They're not perfect, as I would say for example, the wind sculpted rock pieces match color-wise a little bit better, but those pieces are a bit too bulky, and I liked how the monumental pieces are a bit flatter. So they're a bit easier to place down where we might not necessarily have a ton of room. They still look a little bit silly. I think we need to add some more infrastructure around those. Like I said, more fences, maybe more rocks as well, to get all those looking the way they need to. But in, I believe, phase 6, we're going to come back and do some more of that decoration work, and we'll get this back area looking real nice. Anyway, I think that's about all I wanted to cover for Maverick today. Like I said, another long build like we had with Millennium Force. There's a lot going on over here, and there's still a bit of tweaks left to be done to get things looking even cleaner and nicer. But I definitely like what we started with, and I think things are looking pretty good so far. Looking forward to getting more of these buildings down too in the next phase and make this part of the park pop even more. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching me build, and as always, if you've got any comments, questions, or suggestions, please let me know. Thanks for watching.